Here's a scene a lot of chili growers know a little too well. Your plant looks great. Thick, healthy foliage, no pests, no obvious problems anywhere. It gave you a nice first wave of flowers back in early summer. And then, right around the middle of the season, production just quietly grinds to a halt. Blossoms fall off before they ever turn into fruit. The plant isn't dying, it isn't wilting, it just stops trying. You're watering on a normal schedule. You fed it something reasonable. And it still feels like the plant is holding back on you for no clear reason. Last summer, I had 2 chili plants sitting a few feet apart on my patio, both grown from the same seed packet, both in matching pots, both getting the same light and the same watering routine. Nothing about their setup was different. And yet by midsummer, one of them was covered in fruit and the other had basically shut down. That gap between 2 plants that should have behaved identically is what actually sent me looking for a real answer instead of another generic fertilizer tip. Quick pause before we get into it. If you like gardening content that's actually rooted in real plant biology instead of whatever trend is going around, subscribing genuinely helps this channel keep making more of it. And I'd love to know. Drop a comment telling me what city or country you're growing your chilies in right now. I always find it interesting to see how climate changes this whole conversation. All right, for years, my go-to move whenever a plant slowed down was the same one most of us default to. Feed it more. Feed it something stronger. That was my entire strategy for a long time, and looking back, it never actually solved anything. It just masked the problem for a week or 2 before the plant slowed down again. And I'll be straight with you about something else. For a long time, I was convinced the fix was a spoonful of Epsom salt stirred into the watering can. It's probably the single most repeated tip in home gardening circles, passed around so often that nobody questions it anymore. I tried it myself more than once, and honestly, it barely moved the needle. Once I actually dug into the chemistry behind it, the reason became obvious. Epsom salt is magnesium sulfate. Magnesium does matter. It's a core building block of chlorophyll, so a genuine shortage of it will absolutely limit photosynthesis. But magnesium and calcium share the exact same uptake channel in plant roots. They're both what's called divalent cations, meaning they're essentially competing for the same door into the plant. Most garden soil already carries enough magnesium for ordinary growth. So dumping extra magnesium into soil that doesn't need it can actually crowd out calcium uptake. And a calcium shortage inside developing fruit is precisely what causes blossom end rot. The fix people swear by can, in the wrong situation, quietly make things worse. That realization changed everything for me. The nutrient that actually deserves the spotlight for continuous flowering and fruiting isn't magnesium at all. It's potassium. Specifically, potassium sulfate, sometimes labeled sulfate of potash on the packaging. And just like the old advice, the dose is tiny. 1 level tablespoon, completely dissolved into 1 gallon of water, poured around the base of the plant. That's the whole trick. But knowing the trick isn't enough, you need to understand why it actually works, because that's what makes this stick instead of becoming just another tip you forget in a month. Here's the part that took me way too long to fully grasp. A chili plant is not chasing the same goal throughout its whole life. In the early weeks, it's almost entirely focused on building stems and leaves, and nitrogen is the nutrient driving that process. That's normal and healthy at that stage. Once flowering starts, though, the plant's whole agenda shifts. It stops prioritizing leafy growth and starts trying to push energy toward setting and ripening fruit. And here's the catch nobody tells you. If nitrogen levels stay high after flowering begins, the plant keeps behaving like it's still in its leaf-building phase. All that leafy growth becomes what's known as a competing sink, constantly pulling resources away from the flowers, which is a huge reason blossoms drop off before they ever get the chance to become fruit. That single detail explains why a plant can look completely thriving on the outside, dark leaves, full canopy, and still barely produce anything. It isn't struggling. It's just stuck running the wrong program for its current stage. Which brings me back to those 2 plants on my patio. I don't actually think one of them was healthier than the other. I think one simply crossed that internal threshold sooner, maybe because of a slightly different root structure, or because container soil loses nutrients faster through drainage than open garden beds do with regular watering. Now, why potassium sulfate specifically, instead of just any all-purpose feed? Potassium controls something called cell turgor, activates key enzymes, and physically moves sugars from the leaves down into the developing fruit. It's essentially the transport nutrient, the one responsible for getting energy to where fruiting actually happens. Sulfur, the other component in this compound, supports the plant's ability to keep building proteins and enzymes for steady, ongoing growth. Switching from a nitrogen-heavy routine to a low-nitrogen, potassium-forward feed right as flower buds show up is what nudges the plant out of leaf-building mode and into fruit-producing mode. Now I want to walk you through a few other things floating around gardening forums, because I'd rather you hear the full picture than just one shiny tip. Wood ash gets used as a natural potassium source sometimes, and it can genuinely work, but it's very alkaline. Overdo it and you can push your soil pH past 7, which locks away phosphorus and iron and leaves you with yellowing between the leaf veins. Use it lightly if you use it at all. Baking soda shows up as a home remedy for powdery mildew fairly often. Repeated applications build up sodium in the soil over time, which can scorch leaves. Slightly random fact, its one legitimate, well-documented use is actually in commercial greenhouses, where growers use it to neutralize leftover growth hormone residue sitting on benches and floors. Not really relevant to a backyard setup, but worth knowing. Coffee grounds are another one people love recommending. Fresh, uncomposted grounds can actually pull nitrogen away from your plant temporarily, since soil microbes use nitrogen to break down all that carbon. If you want to use them, keep them to a small fraction of your compost pile and let them age first. None of this, including the potassium trick I'm actually recommending, will rescue a plant that's underwatered, planted in soil that doesn't drain, or stuck somewhere without enough direct sun. Get the basics right first. No spoon fixes a broken foundation. Quick reminder while we're halfway through. If this kind of breakdown, actually checking claims against real plant science instead of just repeating them, is useful to you, subscribing helps a ton and I've got plenty more of these coming. And again, tell me in the comments where you're growing from. I read through every single one. Let's cover a few more things that quietly influence flowering, since the spoon only works well when everything around it is dialed in too. Pot size matters more than most people expect. When roots get cramped and start circling the inside of a container, it can trigger an early, stress-driven flowering response. That might sound like a win, but it actually stunts the plant, because the fruit becomes a heavy energy drain before the plant has built enough of a root system to support it. If you're growing in containers, size up gradually as the plant grows, and aim for a final pot around 12 inches by 12 inches. If flowers show up too early on a small plant, pinch them off so the plant can focus on building itself out first. Temperature and humidity matter just as much. Daytime heat above roughly 32 degrees Celsius or nighttime temperatures dropping below about 15 degrees Celsius can damage pollen and cause flowers to drop before fruit ever forms. Dry air causes problems too, particularly indoors, since it dries out the stigma and interferes with pollination. A light misting in the morning and again in the afternoon helps with that, and gently tapping the main stem or brushing the flower clusters encourages pollen to move, since chilly flowers rely on physical movement to self-pollinate. Pruning plays a role too. Pinching out the growing tip on a young plant encourages it to branch out sideways, which means more flowering sites later on. After your first big harvest, cutting back the older, woody stems, paired with a potassium-rich feed, can trigger a strong second round of flowering later in the season. Now the actual method, step by step. 1 level tablespoon of potassium sulfate, dissolved completely into 1 gallon of water. Fully dissolved, not gritty, so the roots absorb it evenly instead of hitting one concentrated pocket. Apply this once every 10 to 14 days, starting the moment you spot your first flower buds, not earlier than that. Pour it slowly around the base and let it soak in naturally. One warning, because I made this mistake with the wrong nutrient before. This is still a salt, More does not mean better results. Overdoing it just builds up in the soil and starts working against the plant instead of helping it. Stick to the schedule and resist the urge to add extra. I want to set realistic expectations here too, because I'm not interested in overselling this to you. You won't wake up to a transformed plant overnight. There's no sudden burst of fruit that wasn't there the day before. What you'll likely notice over the following weeks is more consistent flowering, fewer blossoms falling off before they set, and fruit ripening a bit more evenly across the plant. Going back to that patio last summer, by the end of the season, both plants were finally producing at the same steady pace, loaded with chilies, no real difference between them anymore. Same seed packet, same pots, same watering can. The only thing that had actually changed along the way was what I understood about what they needed. Looking back, the spoon itself was never really the point. Understanding why I was using it and making sure it was the right one, that was the actual lesson. If you give this a shot, come back and tell me how your plants respond. And one more time before you go, drop a comment with where in the world you're growing your chilies from. I genuinely enjoy reading through those. If you want more grounded, well-researched gardening content like this, go ahead and subscribe. I'll keep bringing you what actually works, one season at a time.